We are going to be looking at some disturbing videos, strange and odd news stories, and as always, let's go ahead and get right into today's video. I want to start this video off by saying I'm sorry if I sound a little different or I sound very hoarse. That's because I'm dealing with a severe case of congestion. But getting into today's video, people all across social media, they are talking about this individual's video. This individual goes by Big Ship Poppin on TikTok, and he's a part-time gravedigger. And he came across something that really scared him, but this is something that we have known for quite some time.
Y'all want to hear some shit to really blow y'all's mind this morning? So, as a side hustle, I dig graves in graveyards and cemeteries across Bowling Green and surrounding counties. Something didn't set right with me today. As I was digging, the guy that's the director of the graveyard walked up to me and he was like, we need to lift that casket up to get it even. So we put it on a tally and brought it back up. When we brought it back up, it come off even in a way, but it was crooked in the corner. So he's like, we got to lift it. So I lifted it, me and him together. But the weirdest thing was, it was really light. Like, extremely light. Like, and I'm not a big dude. So I was like, I told him, I was like, why is that so light? He was like, don't ask questions that you ain't ready for. Y'all, I'm freaked out. What are they doing with these bodies? So I was just informed that if I don't take the video down about the body not being in the casket, then I'm going to get fired. My boss called me and told me that the video's causing distraction from the funeral homes and the cemeteries. And that also, it could cause them people to look elsewhere. That being said, it could cost him money for less burials. And me as well. I knew when I posted that there was a possibility, something would be said, but I never dreamed that I could maybe be fired. But honestly, I feel like that I'm going to leave the video up, and whatever comes out of it, comes out of it. They did wrong, not me. No matter what nobody says in the comment, no matter what nobody tells you.
So I'm going to go ahead and pause it right there. There was more to the video, but as you can see and hear, they muted the video. There's no more sound coming from the video. But yes, this man who is a part-time gravedigger, basically what he is saying, at this certain funeral home, there are no bodies inside the caskets. Now, I'm not saying that this is every funeral home or every funeral home. They are involved in some very shady practices, and there are even some people in the comment sections of his videos that are not believing him. Now, my thing is, I don't know why he's so hard to believe, because time and time again, we are getting news story after news story after news story where these funeral homes, they are being raided after information has come out that they are doing some very shady practices and some very illegal things with these bodies. For example, over a year ago, I covered a news story about a woman, Megan Hess, and her mother, Shirley Koch, who operated Sunset Mesa Funeral Home. And they were raided after it came out that they were illegally selling body parts or entire bodies without the family's consent. What was crazy about that story is that it wasn't just a handful of bodies or a dozen bodies. Investigators found over 600 bodies that were either illegally sold as whole or they were cut up and the parts were sent out. Another crazy part of this story is that they knew that a lot of these bodies also had diseases, and they were shipping these bodies off to buyers for, in their words, research and experimentation. Like this part of this article here from the Daily Sentinel, Hess fraudulently obtained the remains of 12 people, one of whom had hepatitis C, and shipped them to buyers in such markets as research and experimentation. Koch, her mother, shipped the fraudulently obtained remains of 9 people, one of whom had hepatitis C. The article goes on to say that according to the government's case-in-chief, Hess used her funeral home to supply bodies for the markets, the black markets, and also ran a related business on the same property as Sunset Mesa Funeral Directors, a non-transplant tissue bank called Donor Services Incorporated. Hess either did not secure permission from the decedent's next of kin, whom she is said to have lured with low-cost cremations, or only received permission for partial donations. These survivors were returned random ashes, represented as those of their loved ones, to cover up a scheme federal prosecutors said victimized scores of families on the Western Slope and beyond. And that's another thing, right, when it comes to these cremations. Now, I get it. Cremations are a much lower cost than a tombstone and a casket, but a lot of people believe that they are getting their loved ones' ashes back, and a lot of times that's not the case. When they'll run tests and so forth, all they'll find is just dirt. They won't find their loved one's ashes or DNA. Or they'll run tests and they'll find that their loved one's ashes are nothing more than the remains of animals. So the question happens to be, if they are not cremating these bodies and they're giving these families something else altogether, the question happens to be, what are they doing with the bodies? And it's not just this one funeral home. There are many examples, many other funeral homes, many other organizations within this business that have been caught doing, again, very shady, very illegal practices with the remains of bodies, whether they're cremated or not. Matter of fact, Megan Hess, she was a domino effect because it came out that she was actually part of a network of funeral directors and funeral homes that were selling off bodies, selling off parts for who knows what. Illegal organ harvesting, big business. The medical industry, experimentation, diseases, and so forth, big business. The food industry, big business. A lot of people are coming out, speaking out, and they're saying the math is not adding up when it comes to the number of animals and all these food chains and restaurants and how much meat they have. Well, Hollywood has given you the truth in plain sight multiple times. Soylent Green is people. I covered a story not that long ago. Diamonds are people. So the human body is very valuable, and they're not going to let that body just sit in the ground wasting away for worms and other insects to just devour or, fade away through time. No, they are going to use that body for multiple means. But it's not just these funeral homes or these funeral directors. This goes way up the food chain. The rabbit hole runs deep because Megan Hess and Shirley Koch, they were sentenced to 20 years for their crimes, but it was tossed out. It was tossed out after finding that the United States District Court had erred in the way it calculated the applicable offenses levels and losses to victims. So these two women, they're going to be retried in court, and the retrial date, I believe, is April 27th. It is already being said that they're only going to be found guilty for mail fraud and not these other very horrific offenses because they are working for some very big and powerful people. But like I said, this news story about Sunset Mesa Funeral Home is only one example out of many. And the only reason why I'm talking about this one funeral home is because I've covered it once before in another video. But given the fact that this has happened numerous times with other funeral homes and directors and so forth, I really have no reason to doubt this man. But in other bizarre news, and I'm reading this from Watchers.news, other news agencies are talking about this. I'm just reading this from this one particular article. It was published on April 17th. It's titled, "Very Bright Fireball Disintegrates Over Mexico City, Loud Rumble Reported." There was also a very bizarre video that came out of this object. I am going to go ahead and play the video, but let me go ahead and continue to read the article. It goes on to say that the fireball was widely observed and recorded across Mexico City, with numerous videos showing the object breaking apart in a flash of light. The article goes on to say that the shockwaves caused by rapid heating and fragmentation of the object were detected by earthquake measuring devices, a typical occurrence when larger objects disintegrate in the atmosphere. But take a look at this one particular video and tell me, is this the way that a supposed meteorite would behave? From what we know about meteorites anyway, they just don't suddenly change directions like that. And what's even more bizarre is the fact that you saw this orb, and as soon as you saw the orb, that's when the meteorite starts to, or the supposed meteorite, starts to curve, it starts to change its direction. The news had also captured this object appearing over the skies at another angle. This is what they captured. But Mexico City has always been a spot of very unusual sightings in the skies. I've covered a couple videos where these orbs were seen coming in and out of volcanoes near Mexico City. There were all these news articles coming out suggesting that these UFOs or whatever these happen to be might be using volcanoes as some kind of portal or wormhole, the energy of these active volcanoes to come in and out. And it's always been my theory that UFOs, or again, whatever they happen to be, do not come from space. They may come from the waters or they may come from other dimensions and using things like volcanoes, the energies to make their way across. Now, I was without my recording equipment for the past few days, or I would have spoken about this story sooner, but I saw this news story and I thought to myself, this is strange. This is really weird given the timing. We're in April, Easter. A lot of people celebrate Easter with rabbits and eggs. Yes, Christians do celebrate today as the resurrection of Jesus, but many other people do Easter egg hunting and take pictures with a rabbit. This story has to have another meaning, a deeper meaning. But anyway, I'm going to go ahead and read this news story from the New York Post. This story was published on April 16th and is titled, Rabbit Sucked into United Airlines Plane Engine Causes Giant Fireball, Forces Flight to Make Emergency Landing. What? I said, what? What did CERN do now? Now, we do know CERN. They are very active in April, firing off the Large Hadron Collider. And I guess they put us in that universe where rabbits have wings. And I know some people are going to say, what are you talking about, you kooky crackpot, Diet Coke with a twist of lemon, bleach drinking conspiracy theorist? Rabbits always had wings. The rabbit clearly flew into the engine like any other bird. This is a non-story. But anyway, the article continues to say that a United Airlines flight made an emergency landing after a fire apparently caused by a rabbit getting sucked into one of its engines before takeoff over the weekend. So of course the plane was still on the ground, but my thing is, how do they know it was a rabbit? Because a rabbit getting sucked into a plane's engine would pretty much turn it into dust particles. But then again, I don't know, but given the fact that it turned the engine into a fireball, one would assume that the rabbit would no longer look anything remotely like a rabbit. But what makes this story even more weird is the airport it departed from. The article goes on to say that dramatic videos showed repeated flashes of flame shooting from one of United Flight 2325's engines shortly after it departed Denver International Airport on its way to Edmonton, Canada. And we do know there's a lot of strange things that surround the Denver International Airport. The flight crew can be heard on live ATC audio requesting the plane to be inspected for an engine fire, which the pilot confirmed was caused by a rabbit strike. So this pilot, he was able to see the rabbit. But anyway, rabbit through the number 2 engine, that'll do it, the pilot said. Passenger Scott Wolf told Good Morning America he heard a loud bang after the unfortunate bunny was ingested by the turbine, followed by a significant vibration in the plane as it continued to ascend. Every few moments there was backfire coming from the engine, a giant fireball behind it, he said. There is just something so strange and suspicious about this story, and I can't really put 2 and 2 together. Even reading the comments people are leaving on this article, people are not buying this story either. There are people leaving comments like, rabbits are afraid of everything, but a rabbit made it out to a runway, somehow climbed up 15 or more feet into an engine without being noticed, and held on until the plane was in the air before being ingested into the turbine. Sure, that happened, not. Also, what's really weird about this story is the fact that the pilot automatically, instantly knew it was a rabbit being sucked into the engine. I just can't buy the fact that he saw the rabbit on the runway. Another person said, this is a fake story. A rabbit took out a jet engine. Come on. When they test these engines, they shoot 20-pound frozen turkeys at them to test their construction. I doubt very, very much a rabbit can cause an engine to vibrate violently and cause fireballs. And really thinking about it, the way a bird really does a lot of damage to a engine of a plane, it's because it flies directly into the plane's engine. There's that speed from the bird. But the rabbit was just on the ground, probably hopping around, and it got sucked in and caused all this damage. I'm just not buying the story. Usually I read the comment sections in these news articles to get the idea of what these people think about these stories. And a lot of times you'll see bots flooding the comment sections, pushing along the narrative. But with this one particular story, like I said, nobody's really buying it. And that's the problem with a lot of these very suspicious stories, because they sound fake. They all sound like distractions. But I feel like we're already distracted enough when it comes to sports, big media, movies, and even politics. And even when we're not distracted, what do? Like when they blew up Hawaii in front of all of our faces and took that land, we saw on camera police stopping people from evacuating and turning them right back into the fires, missing children and so forth. When we're not distracted, what do? So when I hear these very strange stories that do not add up, I automatically do not think of a distraction. I think of something more along the lines of a ritual or some kind of deep symbolism here, especially given, like I said, the timing. And not just the timing, but also the location, the Denver International Airport. This is another story I covered not that long ago where people, they were waltzing right past TSA, no ticket, no nothing, and boarding planes. And this video right here, this news story, shows just how easy it was for this woman to board this plane.
This is the boarding of Delta Flight 264 from JFK to Paris on November 26th, one of the busiest travel days of the year. Agents at Gate B38 usher passengers toward the jet bridge after they show their passports and tickets. Except this woman, the one in the backpack and gray hoodie. Video obtained by ABC News shows Svetlana Dali blending with the crowd, never handing over a boarding pass. That's because she didn't have one. The gate attendants are seen here helping other passengers as Dali passes by. Federal prosecutors say Delta agents who were busy helping ticketed passengers board did not stop her or ask her to present a boarding pass before she boarded the plane.
I think she had her game plan, and it just worked that her game plan really worked. Glom onto the group, and she was able to do that and get through.
By the time the flight crew realized Dali did not have a seat, the plane was on its way to France, and Dali flew as a stowaway. Before she had even reached the gate, Dali went through security without a boarding pass. The FBI says she was able to make it by going through a special lane for crew members. This video, obtained by ABC News, shows her passing through the machine, getting a pat-down, then walking to the conveyor belt to retrieve her luggage. The criminal complaint says Dali conceded she is depicted in these images and told authorities she knew her conduct was illegal. The TSA tells us as a result of our review, additional security measures are now in place. TSA's security measures are always evolving to ensure this type of incident does not happen again. Delta says its security is sound, but in this case, deviation from standard procedures is the root cause.
But the fact that it happens is still very surprising that she was able to get through and do this.
Once Dali reached France, French authorities sent her back to the United States.
Please, help me. I don't want to go to the United States.
Ultimately, Dolly was arrested and released on bail. That was revoked after federal agents said she cut off her ankle monitor and tried to cross the Peace Bridge on a bus to Canada. Dolly has pleaded not guilty. She's being held at the federal jail in Brooklyn. Her attorney declined to comment on the video. She's due to return to court next week, guys.
Given how easy she entered through, it truly makes you wonder how often this happens and how often it goes unreported. But in any case, thank you so much for watching. If you like this channel and you want to see more, please subscribe. If you're already subscribed, please like, as any engagement does help the channel grow. Once again, thank you so much for your support.